Recognized.
Thank you so much. Border security is national security, and the failure of the Biden administration to secure our southern border and uphold our nation's laws has created a situation where the effects of the border crisis are felt nationwide. The number of people crossing the southern border last year dwarfs the number of people who live in the state of Wyoming. Since Biden took office, over 10 times the Wyoming population has crossed the southern border illegally. Statistics from the Wyoming Department of Criminal Investigation show a significant increase in fentanyl seizures within the state. And in 2022, the Wyoming Department of Health put out a notice titled "Fentanyl Burden Growing in Wyoming," as the number of synthetic opioid-involved overdoses deaths more than quadrupled between 2018 and 2021. This situation is simply unsustainable and it's untenable. Sheriff, you've stated that you have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly being a border county and working in a border county. Can you highlight for the committee where we were in 2013, 2018, and 2022 going into 2023 and how they might fall on that scale?
Well, besides my collective statements I've made it during this hearing, I'd like to hit on mainly the aggravated attacks toward law enforcement. That has not been addressed today. We've seen I've always seen border issues in my 38-year career, but what I'm seeing now is something that I've never seen, where almost every other car runs from us, they try to assault us, and this is that fight and flight syndrome. That's why we don't get the give-ups. To give you an example, I'll give you a story. I got a deputy right now on administrative leave, where he made a traffic stop at 10 o'clock at night on a vehicle. The driver got out, fentanyl was thrown all over the highway. The driver was non-compliant. Border Patrol came in behind my deputy to assist him because we work so close with him. It turned into a physical altercation based on his non-compliance. There were 3 illegal migrants in the back seat that ran during this, added more confusion to the case for my deputy. As they got into the altercation to secure the driver, they fell into the roadway. Just as they get him cuffed up, the deputy looks up within half a second, sees a car barreling at him, actually hits the suspect driver, takes him rips him right out of the deputy's hand, kills him. The deputy and the car keeps going. We suspect it was another smuggler driver. That's an opinion. The deputy performed life-saving measures on the individual. Medics got there, took over that. As the deputy went back to the car to check the trunk, which is standard, that's just what we do, open the trunk, a male migrant that was being smuggled illegally actually attacked my deputy a second time.
Goodness gracious.
When I got to the scene, moments later, the deputy made a comment to me, he goes, "Sheriff, I don't know how to prepare for this." And I go, "I don't know how you do it either." The bottom line is, this is a day in Cochise County where the assaults. We had an agent that was attacked on a trail south of my area toward the border. They took the officer tried to take his gun from him. 1 round was fired. They actually took a knife, tried to cut the agent's throat. My deputy, he fought off for 7 minutes before my deputy got there. The assaults we're seeing I've had deputies drugged by cartel drivers. I've seen them assault for no reasons, and the threats. I had the cartels across the line actually come across. We had a couple different sources. They're coming to my county to kill one of my deputies. A random hit. So I could talk all day on this. I know you only got 5 minutes.
Well, Sheriff, giving us that report and that information is incredibly important, and we all hold all of the folks down there in our prayers.
Thank you, ma'am.
One aspect that is important to remember is that President Biden has not only halted the enforcement of the nation's laws at the border, but he openly showcased his action to the world, which only further encourages this security and humanitarian crisis. In contrast, the Trump administration not only enforced our humane immigration laws, but it also made enforcement known to the world. The reality is that Joe Biden has enabled the largest human and drug trafficking operation in U.S. history. The tragedy of that is, as Milton Friedman said, you can have either an open border or you can have a welfare state, or you can't have, that is just an economic reality. You can't have both. It is the poorest U.S. citizens who suffer the most when the government refuses to enforce our immigration laws and secure our border, with overextended services, lack of affordable housing, and suppression of wages. This tragedy is not only man-made, it is government mandated, which is a tragedy and a legacy of this administration that must be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank the gentlelady. The gentleman from Texas recognizes Sheriff Daniels. When you have to go, you just tell me.
Yeah, we're pushing time here real quick.
Okay.
So
You got it.
maybe one more.
All right, one more.
Thank you, Congressman. He knows my pain.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Samaniego, I want to address my comments to you and some questions to you as well. Until my election to Congress in November of 2022, I actually was a Texas County judge as well, serving for 6 years in East Texas in Smith County. So I'm very familiar with the limitations of your job and the demands of your job, both in terms of manpower and financial resources to meet the needs of your local county, just like I had to do for 6 years in Smith County. One of the things, though, that I can say is even in East Texas, we recognize that there is a real need to support border security and that there is a crisis on the border. So I'm surprised by your comments here today that would indicate that there's nothing wrong and nothing going on the border out there. I've been out to the El Paso sector as well, so I know firsthand that that's simply not the case. During my tenure as county judge, we worked even in East Texas to fight against the cartels, doing things like setting up a financial crimes unit that was a statewide unit that's now leading the way against financial crimes that the cartel is using for human trafficking, to underwrite their human trafficking and their drug trafficking. We also, in conjunction with our neighboring counties and several state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies, set up a TAG unit, a Texas Anti-Gang Unit. You guys probably have one in El Paso County as well. And that works against the cartels. So I really am shocked here today that you would really dismiss the concerns of the right side of the aisle and say there's simply not a problem and not a crisis at all. I want to also address the fact that Judge Carruthers is not here today because being the Terrell County judge, she's a good friend of mine. And as county judges, we had lots of conversations about what was going on in Terrell County. And I recall those personal discussions way before I even decided to run for Congress, of her saying, listen, there's times at night when the sheriff will call me and I'm alone in our ranch on that 17,000 acre ranch by myself, and he's calling me to say, there are a large group of individuals that have just crossed the border. You need to be very careful, and you're in a very precarious situation. And she could not sleep well at night because of that. There's a lot of instances like that where she can recount that. I hope you're not discounting her story about what's going on in Terrell County. Are you at all doing that, sir?
Absolutely, but I think you're mixing things, and that is that El Paso is very, very different from those other communities. So I cannot speak for them, but I could speak for El Paso. You've got the largest FBI, you've got the largest law enforcement, you've got a lot of conditions that you don't see. Having crime in El Paso is not, people know that's the worst place that you could go.
But in your capacity as county judge, you're focused on county operations. So let's talk about that for a moment. Have you guys analyzed from the El Paso County standpoint, what's the total cost of having to deal with on the local taxpayers' burdens in their backs, issues related to migrants crossing the border illegally? Have you guys analyzed that cost?
Absolutely, and we, like 95% is paid by FEMA, and they're the ones that are assisting. The federal government is assisting, otherwise we couldn't do it.
But your sheriff's office, I'm sure, is having to deal with those issues, or are they not?
Well, we have not had increases in jails or migrants or related to migrants in our sheriff's office.
What percent of your population in your jail are migrants that have come over illegally across the border?
Very small, very small.
What would you characterize as very small?
I wouldn't want to say something without fully understanding that, but I could tell you, I ask the sheriff all the time, has there been an increase because of migrants? Have there been and we don't face that.
Has your dispatch operations tracked the number of calls that your sheriff's officers have to go on that deal with illegal immigration?
Our biggest impact, Congressman, it has to do with medical, like falling, people falling, trying to get across the wall and hurting themselves, and children hurting themselves. But one of the things that you keep saying that things have changed, but we're not taking into consideration that the world has changed and there's an increase of a necessity to move into the border. So you cannot, it's apples and oranges. When I talk to every single migrant that I talk to, they're having to experience things that they didn't experience last year, or experienced 2 years ago. These are new changes in the world that's creating the increase as well. So it's not fair to say.
I understand, but some things don't change, like good fences make good neighbors. That's something I learned as a 12-year-old boy when my next-door neighbor told me I could swim in a swimming pool, and then the next thing I did was I took my friends over there without permission, and he said, you know what, that's not what I authorized you to do. And he had that right. It's not because he didn't like me, it's because at the end of the day, that's his property. And we were good neighbors as a result of ourselves respecting each other's property. Shouldn't we do that on a national basis?
Absolutely. I think there's some confusion to believe that we don't want orderly, but we don't have that luxury.
So then would you support Congressman Roy's bill that would just simply say enforce the laws currently in place?
Well, that's what we do. There's nothing that we do. Asylum is legal. And we deal, the majority of people that come across us through asylum, and that's legal. And there's nothing I can do
Gentleman
about
yields.
that.
Thank you,
Gentleman
Mr.
yields back.
Chairman. I yield.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Thank you, Sheriff, for your testimony, more importantly, for your work that you do in the law enforcement community, and express that same thanks to your deputies as well.
Thank you,
Now
Mr.
recognize the
Chairman. Thank
gentlelady.
you all.
You bet. Thank you. We now recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Sheriff, for being with us here today, and to all of our witnesses. The testimony that we have heard today makes clear that the crisis and lawlessness at our southern border is endangering every American community. Drug cartels and human traffickers are exploiting our failure to secure the southern border, and their criminal activities are eroding community safety across America. In my community, authorities in Polk County confiscated recently 11 pounds of fentanyl. Following this drug bust, our state's Attorney General Ashley Moody announced that authorities had seized enough fentanyl in the last few months to kill every single Floridian. We have an obligation to take action to protect our communities, and we are a nation of laws. We have an obligation to enforce our laws, to secure our borders, and to keep our communities safe. I'd like to return, Mr. Dunn, to your testimony and first express my sincere condolences for your loss. As a mother, it is particularly important to me that we always remember that this isn't just a crisis of statistics, that this is a tragedy in individual American families that cannot be set right. I would appreciate it, sir, if you would do us the honor of sharing with us a little bit more about your son. What was he like?
He was an athlete. He played football. He was an honor roll student. He was a friend. He had so many friends.
How would you describe the threat of fentanyl poisoning to your son and to other young men and women who are like him across America?
It's there. I mean, he was exposed to it by somebody that he considered a friend, and he unfortunately didn't survive. He had other friends days later that were poisoned also, and luckily they were saved. The threat is real, and we've met at least 30 or so families personally in the short amount of time that we've been doing what we've been doing, and we don't get into what politics each other follows. I don't know the political affiliations of any of them. We don't talk about politics. It's not a political issue. But every single one that I've talked to since they found out I was coming here was tell them we have a problem.
Could you tell us about your organization, the Forever 15 Project?
We primarily speak to schools. We're really trying to reach the youth in our communities. We do public speakings at schools, churches, any organization that'll have us come out and speak. We've partnered with the Hays County Sheriff's Department. They do a presentation that presents facts and statistics on fentanyl, and then Janelle will tell our story to make it relatable to the young people we're talking to. We also do a lot of awareness through billboards. We paid to have a billboard in Hays County. We were fortunate enough to be provided other locations throughout the state of Texas because of the overwhelming response that media company received about our billboard. Just anything we can do to get the word out is what our focus is.
And are there changes that you would like to see enacted or things that we can do to help ensure that another tragedy like this doesn't occur?
Just stop it from getting here. I mean, there's always going to be drugs smuggled in. It's happened forever. But, you know, in the last couple of years, not just fentanyl, but all narcotic smuggling has increased exponentially. And while that in and of itself is bad, fentanyl is far deadlier than any other drug out there. And it has a greater ability to kill more Americans than any other drug out there.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank the gentlelady. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Texas for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask unanimous consent, and this is on behalf of Mr. Ivy, to submit into the record a letter signed by El Paso's bishop, the Most Reverend Mark Seitz, who is the chairman of the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration, and it is a letter asking Congress to oppose H.R. 29.
Without objection, so ordered. The chair now recognizes for our last 5 minutes of questioning the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Fry.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this hearing today. Thank you to our witnesses that are here. Mr. Dunn, words can't express how sorry I am for your loss. I was in the General Assembly in South Carolina up until recently and served as the chairman of the House Opioid Abuse Prevention Study Committee, where we passed 18 bills, record investment. And I'll tell you that every hearing that we started and every hearing that we finished, we started with families who are going through exactly what you're going through. So I know how incredibly tough it is for you. I know how incredibly brave it is for you to be here today to share your story. Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you, you know, it's amazing to me just hearing some of the things that have come out of this committee that we on this side of the aisle have imagined things, that we are engaging in conspiracy theories. We are not imagining the increase in human trafficking on our southern border. We are not imagining the record amount of fentanyl seizures, fentanyl into this country, fentanyl-associated deaths and overdoses that occur every single day. We are not imagining 5 million people in this country or the 1.2 million gotaways. You know, we talked about a little bit, Judge, earlier, about the amount of people who are seeking asylum. What's interesting to me, just looking at the statistics, was that, as was alluded to earlier, 14% of those individuals were considered lawful. Now, this was under an Obama administration and a Trump administration, so 14% of all people who said that they were seeking asylum were actually legitimate asylum seekers. And of that, a third, according to Biden v. Texas, a third of that absconded into the United States, never appearing for their immigration proceedings again. So I look at the way in which the other side today has really glossed over the problems that have been exacerbated by this administration. And as somebody who's dealt with the opioid epidemic in my state and how I have studied how other states have handled it in Texas and elsewhere, I'm incredibly frustrated by unwillingness to deal with this problem. But I do want to ask a few questions of both of you, and I'll start with you, sir. You've obviously seen Texas and other states, and you've talked to parents involved. In your opinion, are governments attempting to try to deal with, in good faith, the fentanyl epidemic in this country?
Honestly, up until Noah's passing, we really didn't hear much about fentanyl. We had started to hear some about it shortly before he passed. Since then, our local sheriff's department has been very proactive. I don't hear a lot on the state level. I know there's stuff, about the test strips and whatnot, but I haven't heard. I've seen billboard media in the Dallas area, so I'm sure there are other areas where awareness is being raised, but I don't think on a wide-scale level the issue is getting much attention.
And we're not getting any attention, in your opinion, or much attention from the federal government to the level it should be.
No.
What would you tell, to piggyback on what Ms. Lee was talking about earlier, what would you tell parents and children about the risks associated with fentanyl?
Like we tell our 5-year-old daughter, don't take anything from anybody. Nothing, you have to assume that everything is dangerous now. And one of the comments the sheriff that we do speakings with makes is the days of experimentation are over. You were a kid, you could try smoking pot, or you could try this, that, or the other. Now fentanyl has been mixed with everything. So you can't assume anything's safe. If you don't get a prescription from a pharmacy, you can't assume that it's what you're getting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Judge, real quick, President Biden recently visited the border, passing through El Paso, and I think there was a comment from you in the press that he didn't get to see the real difficulties. What did you mean by that, and what difficulties did he not see on his trip?
Well, I know a lot of people thought that we had something to do, they call it sanitizing, but I could tell you that would be crazy on my part for him not to see what really was happening. It just so happened the numbers had come down. I mean, we wanted anybody, please see what we really go through. So we were not.
What do you think took him so long to visit the border?
I can't tell you. I know that thanks to Congresswoman Escobar, we're really connected through her, and she's connected to the secretary, to the ambassador, and we're constantly communicating through them. And so I have a lot of trust that Congresswoman Escobar is relaying the information that he needs. And I don't think it's that important that he's not there, but that he supports what we're trying to accomplish, and that is the humanitarian component that El Paso has been doing for centuries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Judge, just real quick, if I could, you said the numbers went down. It just so happened they went down when President Biden visited your city and the ranking member city. Are they back up now?
Nope.
Okay.
No, we're still pretty low.
Okay. Okay. I want to thank everyone. Before we adjourn, we want to inform all members about a CODEL our committee will be taking to the border on February 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. To make the minority aware of that. This hearing has made clear some of the problems real problems that we see at our border and across our country. So we want to make sure we can get down to visit that area here later this month. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. Without objection, this hearing is adjourned.